What's up, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of the Real Talk Ravens podcast, where we're going to be previewing our AFC Championship matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs, the six-time back-to-back in the AFC Championship.
Well, if it means anything, he's 1-1 against the AFC North in the AFC Championship game. So
yes, he is. He's definitely he lost to the Bengals.
Yeah, well,
he beat the Bengals.
Well, in the AFC Championship game, they've played the Steelers also, I think, before, but I think that was like wild card.
Okay. Just getting into just real quick before the only transaction that we have made within this week, we did waive outside linebacker Jeremiah Moon.
Oh yeah.
And then we obviously, that's the only thing that's happened since last week. So I don't know.
That's a good sign, though. That means that everything kind of seems to be headed in the right direction.
That might have been because it was his last practice squad escalation, and maybe we're just going to let it come back around, just like we did with Melvin Gordon to sign back to the practice squad. So,
boy, am I excited for this game. I think it really just hit me today how huge this is. Like, of course, we've all been talking about this, and we've been hoping for it all year and kind of willing it into existence. A lot of Ravens fans will say they felt like, including myself, that we might be here at this point this year, but now it's actually here.
But we've been feeling it like this every year. We're like, oh, this is our year. And now
we're like Cowboys fans, man.
We've got all the pieces. We are hosting the AFC Championship for the very first time in franchise history. So to be quite honest, this is the biggest home game in the Ravens history. Yeah.
And it's only fitting that we would be playing it against the reigning Super Bowl champions. And he won MVP last year too, right? Patrick Mahomes reigning MVP?
I think he did. I think so. Yep.
Yeah.
So
he beat out Hurts.
You got to beat the best to be the best, right? So
absolutely.
I think it couldn't have gone any better than this. So just looking, though, at our weather report, we just kind of peeked at this. It looks like we might be getting some rain and wind here. At first, they were saying it was going to be nice and 40 degrees, 45 degrees, and now they're saying it's still going to be in the 40s, but there's a chance that there's a low-pressure system that could produce periods of rain and gusty winds at M&T Bank during the game. So if you are going to the game, make sure you bring some rain gear. You don't want to be sitting in your $700+ seats all soaked.
I'll say this from experience. Even a slight rain with that wind in Baltimore, it's not fun. Dress up. Be ready. I love this. I hope it rains. I hope it's windy because Patrick Mahomes, he played in the cold a couple weeks ago at home in front of his fans. But he has to come into our fortress this week and just make the weather worse. Make it harder for his receivers to catch the ball. Make it harder for his players to hold on to the ball. Make it so that he has to do absolutely everything. And of course, he's proven he can, but he's never proven that he can against us in the playoffs, especially on the road.
That's true. That is very true. So just quickly getting into who we got here for our referee. A lot of people have, made some comments on this. We're getting Sean Smith, who is notorious for basically home teams not performing when he's reffing.
Yeah.
We did have him. The last time we had him was the Jacksonville game, which you were at, Mike.
Yeah.
And we were the away team, so I guess it kind of helped us out then. But
they had a lot of calls against them, but I will say they weren't unjust calls. You know what I mean? They weren't unjust calls. Now, I'd have to ask a Jags fan, someone who was really paying attention, if they missed anything against us. Because from my memory, I don't feel like they did. I feel like it was a pretty consistently called game. And that's why I wasn't too worried when I heard it was him. But now everyone's got kind of panic mode.
Yeah, I think so. Normally, home field is 55% chance of winning. And when he's been reffing, it's 45% or something like that. So
40.8% chance.
Okay, 40%. So It's just a pretty significant drop off for him.
It really
But
is.
I have a feeling the fact that this is, making so much news, it's really hard for him to come out here and go one way or the other. He's got
I
to,
think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, he's got to call it both ways and try to call it as even as anything. And from what I've seen so far in the playoffs, they're pretty much letting the guys play.
I think there's one very simple solution to avoiding any controversy with the refs, and that's to go out there and do exactly what we know this team can do against the Chiefs. Don't give
Yeah.
their don't let it be close in the fourth quarter where a bad call can change the course of the game. Don't be like Buffalo where you keep them in this game. Do
You
not
got
keep them in this game. Put
you
your
got to
foot
play
on their
smart.
throat and don't let go.
You got to be. You also have to play smart, especially on defense. You got to know who you're playing against. This is Patrick Mahomes. He's the king of roughing the passers, just like Tom Brady did. He's the king of whining to the refs anytime he gets touched after he lets go of the ball. So I know last week from watching it, we hit Stroud a few times. I thought were questionably late, and I don't think we get away with that this week. I think we got to kind of hold back on that. Yeah, we want to, put some pressure on him, but we can't be doing that.
I think what's going to happen is we might get one or two roughing the passers because it just always happens with Patrick Mahomes. Anytime he gets touched, he flops. He's a flopper. That's what he is. He's a flopper. But he's also really, really smart, and he knows that if he does that every 5 seconds, it's not going to go. But I think we're going to ring his bell once or twice, and he's going to start to get really upset. Kind of like, if anyone watched Hard Knocks, the Dolphins this season, they go over it. I actually just started it, so this is why it's fresh in my mind. But they go over with Tua when they're about to play the Raiders with Max Crosby, how even when he's not going to make a play, he's still like in his face. He's grabbing the jersey. He's doing all that. And that's the kind of thing you have to do against Patrick Mahomes. Make him think that no matter what, he's not safe. He's not safe.
Yeah.
And just get in his head,
100%. 100%.
And I know that Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike, Kyle Hamilton, if they have their way, that's exactly what will happen,
Here's the injury report for this week. Obviously, you're looking at just the size of each of the teams. Kansas City's got a much, much larger injury report compared to us, which is good. Their main guys to keep an eye out for are safety Mike Edwards, who got a concussion last week. He did come back into a limited capacity today. Which probably means he'll be out there. Isaiah Pacheco has not practiced yet, but he has said that he's going to play. But to what extent will he maybe be affected by this injury? Who knows?
So I know it's a toe and an ankle, but is it a turf toe or is it just like he kind of like got stepped on or like, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know. But the biggest injury is guard Joe Thuney, who's an all-pro guard for them, probably one of the best guards in the NFL. Has not practiced, and they're saying is very unlikely to play with a pectoral injury. They're saying they haven't really announced it officially, but it sounds like he tore his pec.
That's something they'll hold close to camp. But he said earlier that if there's any chance he can play, he's playing.
Just like Mark Andrews did last week.
Right. And so I guess that makes you wonder, would you rather play an injured Joe Thuney or not have him? I think
either way it benefits us.
Well, I think Joe Thuney is one of those players where if they shoot him up and he's in the game, he'll probably be fine because he's one of those difference-making players.
The thing about a pec injury for an offensive lineman is you're using that muscle every single snap, and I just don't think you're going to be as effective. I think, it's not as much about the pain as it is about the strength. Yeah. You're not going to be able to hold those blocks like you used to.
It's not like Marcus Williams where he can kind of ease himself back into it,
Yeah, he's got to use that muscle every single snap. So,
yeah,
I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see if he plays or not. But one other guy that kind of popped up today was Kadarius Toney, who went from practicing in full to being in a limited capacity today.
A lot of Chiefs fans don't think he'll really get much of an opportunity to play anyway. Kind of from what I've heard.
He is, to me, he's the biggest threat with his punt returns from what I've seen. And we just gave up a punt return touchdown. So that is something that really scares me.
Yeah. I think though, we cannot sit here and applaud the offense and the defense for adjusting, and then not expect the special teams to adjust. We're all locked in. I think that I mean, like, you look at the rest of the game and special teams was fine. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that it's gonna be.
Chris Horton actually got interviewed after practice, I think yesterday, and pretty much said what we all thought, that it was just an awful, awful punt by Jordan Stout, and our return or our coverage was not set up to go to where he kicked it, and that's why they had that opening.
And it happens sometimes. I think it was just, yeah. I mean, Jordan Stout will be fine, I'm sure.
Hopefully he got all that out of his system. So looking at the Ravens injury report, Mark Andrews has been practicing still in full, and they're saying it. I think Schefter has already said it's likely that he will be out there on Sunday.
He's expected to be playing.
Yeah, expected to be playing. To what extent, we don't know. But even if he does play, in certain situations, that would be huge. Corner
at a limited capacity, even if he does play.
I don't think he's going to be 100%. He'll probably be closer to like 80%. Marlon Humphrey, calf injury, is back practicing this week in a limited capacity. And he has said after today's practice that he felt good. So hopefully that means he'll be at least able to go, every other drive or something like that.
I think back to our point we made the other night, I would not want to put like a 75% Marlon Humphrey out there, though. Like, I want him to be 100% because he's the one who gets targeted.
Yeah, and it also depends on what coverage we're in. Are we going to be in a zone coverage or are we going to be in a man coverage? Because if we're in man coverage, you don't want an injured guy out there.
No. So we'll use him as needed if he's able to go.
And I also like the point that we brought up last episode about him playing some nickel and, just being that guy as a, sure tackler in the run game. That would
be, if he wants to play a lot, I think that would probably be his best bet.
Yeah. Delshon Phillips still limited with a shoulder injury. Tylan Wallace returned to practice today in limited capacity. Rocky Sin limited. And then Kevin Zeitler did not practice on Wednesday for rest and was back and completely off the injury report today.
So with Rock Yassin, I didn't really realize that. Like, I knew he had been banged up, but I didn't realize it was like.
I think it's a combination of the fact that he doesn't really play too much, and we're not really trying to, have him. We're not like forcing him to be out there,
Yeah, I think he'll probably be good to go, especially if Marlon Humphrey isn't 100%.
Yeah, we got to have all hands on deck, especially against this passing attack. So
yeah, and yeah, sorry, we'll get into that in a minute.
But yeah, that pretty much wraps up the injury report. So obviously the final injury report will come out tomorrow, Friday, and we'll see exactly where we're at. Might be some game time decisions. Biggest one on there is Joe Thuney for the Chiefs.
Yeah. I know he's practicing in full, but I know Marquez Valdez-Scantling has that oblique that he's dealing with, I guess. Probably just like, a little banged up. He'll probably be fine. I think he's one of the players we really do have to keep an eye on because he made himself a little more respectable last week. So,
Yeah, he did. He had a good game last week, but that was really, I think, his best game of the season.
Yeah, well, I mean, momentum is a big thing. So,
yeah. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into the offensive keys now. Looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, there's one person that really comes to mind when you think of that defense, and that's Chris Jones up front. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I'll say, that looking back at the Buffalo game, what happened was anytime Chris Jones was out of the game, you could tell Spags, the defensive coordinator, was not very comfortable with their run defense and was kind of loading up the box to try to stop the run because he knew when Chris Jones was out of the game, he couldn't just line up in his base defense and be able to defend the run. So we got to look for that and kind of game plan off of that. When Chris Jones is out of the game, maybe that's our chance to take some shots because they're going to load the box up and give us one-on-one matchups.
I've kind of heard that like maybe the Chiefs strategy will be similar to what the Texans were doing earlier last week, is just kind of like blitz us a lot, kind of give us a lot of pressure.
Which would make sense because they are better in man coverage than I think the Texans are. The Chiefs that's something that's in their base defense. They run a lot of man coverage with L'Jarius Sneed as their
Their secondary
lockdown.
is solid, and even McDuffie has been solid this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think this offensive game plan, honestly, is going to honestly just be a little bit more of Lamar Jackson running the ball. He's going to have to do that with his legs. I think if they're going to play that type of defense, we're going to have to get him out on the edge.
I
And
think this
just
game plan might look very similar to kind of how we set up to play against the Seahawks, but a little more Lamar running centralized as well.
I think Lamar ran for 100 yards last week. I think there's a chance he goes even bigger than that this week. And then that threat alone is going to soften up their blitz game, and then that's when he's going to be able to hit his quick passes and do our normal game plan.
Definitely.
Yeah, so really it's just a matter of this game to me is a huge chess match between coaches. I'd say Mike McDonald and Spagnuolo for the Chiefs are the two best defensive coordinators in the NFL.
I'd say two of the three best head coaches in the AFC for sure.
Yeah, and then you've got Monken obviously is balling out this year, and he's been in national championships the last 2 years, so he's been doing great. And then Andy Reid's Andy Reid. So
now, one thing to keep an eye on, apparently, as every team has like their different sets, apparently it kind of seems like, and especially sometimes they have sets where like Kelsey and MVS and maybe Pacheco aren't out there. Like they're all not out there, or like a couple of them are out there, but one of them isn't. And you kind of see it with Patrick Mahomes. He's kind of gained confidence in Gray. I forget his first name, but who I'm
Noah Gray.
Noah Gray, yeah. That's kind of been his dependable guy when those guys aren't on the field. And you kind of feel like sometimes Patrick Mahomes doesn't really have that guy he trusts when no one else is on the field. But I think Noah Gray is kind of becoming that guy. So he's another person to really keep an eye out on.
Definitely defensively. But looking back at our offense, I would say, I think we're going to be able to run the ball on them just because we are going to outsize them up front. They obviously have a linebacker in Nick Bolton, who is one of the best in the NFL. They've got, Chris Jones, but outside of Chris Jones, they're pretty weak up front.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, they
more of a run down their throat, or more of a Justice Hill, like a quick little on the outside and a dink and dunk.
It kind of just depends on what they line up in. If they're going to stuff everyone in the inside gaps, then we can try to get it outside and bounce it. If they're going to try to spread out and try to contain Lamar and contain that outside run, then we can dive up the middle with Gus and even Justice Hill. He can do that on early downs. We don't have to rely on him for that.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see if we get Dalvin Cook more involved.
I think he'll have a much bigger role this week. All indications kind of point like he's probably in the game plan somewhat.
I think we're going to end up doing a lot more of that two-back stuff, and he's probably going to be in there on that personnel. But then, like we said, going back to the injury report, Mark Andrews being a factor here it's going to be interesting to see how we use him and how much we use him.
I think he'd be a huge person to have available for, like you were saying earlier, in the red zone, because then that's going to hold the Chiefs honest, because they won't know what to do. Because what if we have Isaiah Likely, then Gus Edwards, or even Justice Hill kind of behind, and then we've got our receivers out there, and
the difference I feel like with this Ravens offense from past years is that you can't just play man coverage on us and expect our receivers not to get open. We don't have elementary passing concepts. We actually have legit receivers that can get open versus man coverage. Zay Flowers made Stingley last week go in circles. Isaiah Likely mossed him. This is a top corner in the NFL. So, I know L'Jarius Sneed is a physical corner and is more of a man corner than Stingley is, but we've got the receivers to beat him.
Two things I wanted to mention, actually. Number one is, if they are playing man, our offense doesn't really have a number one receiver. Zay Flowers is our number one receiver, but everyone's making plays, everyone's getting theirs. And also, I think it would be foolish to not mention the Chiefs defense is one of those defenses kind of like us last week where they tend to start slow and clamp down late. So it's like we really do have to have a faster start this week. Because if we go into halftime 10-10, that's exactly where the Chiefs will want us. You know what I
They
mean?
do. Yep, 100%. And going back to the Chiefs injury report with Mike Edwards having that concussion, he was their spy on Josh Allen last week. So I would assume if he's healthy and playing, that's going to be the guy spying Lamar Jackson.
Can anyone really truly spy Lamar Jackson?
I mean, I would say if the best that did it was last week, Christian Harris.
Yeah.
He did a really good job until he got hurt.
True. And that's the thing with the Texans is they've just had so many injuries. It's kind of was swept under the rug because they won their first playoff game. But they did have a lot of injuries on that defense. One thing to mention also, like the Chiefs have the highest sack rate per pressure, meaning like when they blitz, they have the highest sack rate per blitz. And we have a good offensive line, but we do allow sacks because Lamar tends to either hold on to the ball or just like someone will miss an assignment. And I know that Spags is going to have some exotic blitzes and stuff dialed up for us. So that's going to be our offensive line versus their like kind of their D line and who they're going to send at the blitz. It's going to be a very key matchup because that's kind of their bread and butter on defense.
I'd like to see us kind of, if we're in that long distance, long yardage situation where that's coming on third downs, max protect, have 7 guys, keep the running back and the tight end in to block, and then let your receivers work, let them get open. And I know Lamar's going to put the ball on them. I know they're going to get open.
And let's be honest, this Chiefs secondary is very physical. We can draw fouls against this team. I know that's not necessarily like a great strategy to always have, but OBJ draws fouls. Zay Flowers draws fouls. So I think that would be, like you were saying, a really key thing, kind of just trust our guys to make the play, trust our guys to block, and maybe they'll commit a foul or maybe we'll just make the play.
Yeah, the thing about max protection coming from a quarterback's perspective, it's like the safest thing that you can do. Even versus an all-out blitz, you're protected. They're not going to spring more than 7 guys, and if they do, then someone's wide open.
Right.
So, I think if we do that, it's going to make Lamar's job easier and make his reads simple and just, pick his best one-on-one matchup.
Certainly.
So, yeah, I think, offensively, I will say this about our O-line. Ronnie Stanley had his best game of the season last week. He didn't let up one pressure. He actually looks like he's gained strength randomly.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened overnight. It seemed like he can actually get down and he's flexible again. He's kind of looked like his old self.
He had he was back and forth in and out for the last few weeks, and he had pretty much 2 weeks off. That'll do wonders, especially for a big guy like that who's had a lot of injuries,
Dude, all I'm saying is he is making a case for his spot on the roster for next year.
Might make it tough to keep some of the guys we were talking about,
we were talking about getting rid of him, but after that, what he's been doing lately, I think it'll be pretty tough to get rid of him because I don't think you're going to find many that can do what he's doing right now.
Well, let's just hope it's not. Whatever happens, let's just hope that it at least lasts for 2 more games. Just make it last for 2 more games. We'll figure it out in the offseason.
That's true. Yep. That's pretty much all I got offensively. What about you?
I did want to mention just the again how well we've been spreading the ball out. I know a lot of Ravens fans are worried that now that we're going to have Mark Andrews in the game, it might kind of slow some things down. But I think what you have to do is you have to really give Lamar his credit and give Todd Monken his credit and give them a chance to actually do what they've been doing since the bye weekend, which is really just spreading out the ball, understanding that Mark Andrews is just going to be another weapon. Doesn't mean we have to go to him when he's on the field. And if he is playing and mostly healthy, people forget how dominant he was at parts of this season. Like the game he went down in, it was looking like he was going to have a 200-yard, 5-touchdown night before.
Well, I think what you kind of saw was Lamar's development without Mark Andrews. and he was forced to not rely on him every time there was a key situation. Before, if it was a key situation, you knew he was going to Mark Andrews, whether he was double
Yeah.
covered or triple covered, he was going to find Mark Andrews. Or he was going to, take a sack or throw an interception or run it or whatever. He didn't really know what else to do. But without him, it's forced him to develop. And I don't think by plugging Mark Andrews back in, it's going to really make him revert back to that. I think if anything, he's going to just continue on his path of development that he's on now. And he's going to be able to, use Mark Andrews without keying in on him.
I think honestly, I'll be dead serious. I think the loss of Mark Andrews spurred the change that caused Lamar to most likely be MVP this season.
I agree.
So give him his credit. He's probably going to be MVP. We got this. It's never a bad thing to get your all-pro tight end back,
Yeah.
It's never a bad thing.
No, for sure. You ready to go to defense?
Absolutely. I'm more excited about our defensive matchup against the offense of the Chiefs than our offense, to be completely honest.
Yeah. Lately, it seems the last few games, Kansas City has really gone into heavier sets and tried to just ground and pound it with Pacheco and run the ball down people's throats. They went into a lot of 13 personnel, which is one running back, 3 tight ends versus the Bills, a much larger percentage than they have for the rest of their games this season. And that was, I think, the reason they did that was because of obviously the Bills, weakness at linebacker with their injuries. And they were just like, we're going to run it right at freaking AJ Klein, he's awful. They picked on him. People don't realize how much they picked on him when you go back and watch it.
That's pretty much the reason why the Chiefs were able to put up as many points as they were.
They put him spinning in circles last week.
I mean, if you remember, before they had to kind of depend on him, the game was a lot tighter defensively before people started going down. It was tighter, and then they figured out, we can exploit this. Nothing against AJ Klein, because there's a reason he's not their starting linebacker. You know what I mean?
He's a special teams player.
Right. It's like if we had to rely on Trenton Simpson and Patrick Queen.
Or, at least. At best, yeah.
Knock on
but honestly, if they come out and try to do that versus us, that is exactly what we want. We would love to put you in a phone booth and make you run the ball at us, at our big freaking D-line and linebackers. I'll put our box up against anybody.
Is it me? Am I the only one who feels this way? But I am not worried about our run defense anymore.
I'm not going to say I'm not worried about it, but I'm going to say that
in this matchup,
in that situation, if they're going to try to put all these tight ends in, try to get big personnel in, and try to run it right at us, I'm not worried if they do that. What makes me concerned is when they spread you out and they get into these, receiver heavy formations where they're maybe in 10 personnel, which is 1 running back, 0 tight ends, or 11, and they put Travis Kelce out wide and then spread our entire defense out. We have a 5-man box, and then, it's 5-on-5, and then they have a hat on a hat for pretty much everybody, and then they can just let Pacheco go.
Let's remember 2 key things about this matchup. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes is pretty much exactly the same, has like the exact same success rate with or without the blitz this season. Historically, you don't want to blitz Patrick Mahomes. The great thing about this matchup is that we lead the leagues in sacks, but we blitz the least in the league.
There's a common misconception, I feel like, because of how in the past the Ravens front couldn't really produce any sacks on their own without blitzing. And I've seen people in the media say that the Ravens defense can't get sacks unless they are blitzing guys and producing pressures with Mike McDonald calling crazy blitzes. No, we have guys. We have Justin Madubuike, who has got double-digit sacks. We have Jadeveon Clowney, that's 7 sacks. We got Kyle Van Noy. We've got Adafe Owe. We are loaded up there. We have a bunch of dudes. And
Travis Jones. I want Travis Jones.
Travis Jones has been freaking balling out in the playoffs.
Now, just remember, this is Patrick Mahomes. He's going to have a couple miracle plays, either with his legs or with his arm. It's inevitable. Just like when they play us, it's inevitable. Lamar's going to do some crazy crap. Mahomes will too. There's probably going to be like some stupid 3rd and 23 that's run 40 yards for a touchdown, and we're going to be like, what the heck? But the key to beating the Chiefs, it's a game of endurance. It really is, because Patrick Mahomes is there ready for a shootout, no matter who's by his side every week. So
Yeah, at this point in his career, he's played so much football now. I mean, you got to think every single year he's playing at least 3 or 4 extra games in the playoffs, and
he's
his experience, you're not going to really confuse him too much. Like we were able to confuse CJ Stroud a few
right.
times with, just lining up like crazy and having him not know where guys were dropping, things like that. Like Mahomes, he's going to call out right before the play, hey, Michael Pierce is dropping back. Don't worry about him. Like he knows exactly, like he's just got that sense. He's been doing it long enough at this point, and he's very, very, very good at what he does. So
this is
yeah, like we're playing the number one quarterback in the NFL. I don't care what anyone says. He is the top quarterback.
like despite everything that happened this season, the Chiefs are still here. And if they didn't have Patrick Mahomes, they would have lost to the Dolphins. They might
probably
not
wouldn't be in the playoffs.
Patrick Mahomes is the Chiefs' great equalizer, the same way Lamar Jackson is our great equalizer. He will put that team on his back and he will carry them if he has to.
Yeah.
So
even more so because this year with their team, the Chiefs, they don't really have a great roster. If you really look at their roster outside of, offensively, they've got, Tooney, who we talked about. They have, Pacheco and Kelsey. And
I think it's important to remember, even despite having a down year, they were still a top 10 offense. Travis Kelsey.
A lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that Andy Reid is a genius play caller.
He is.
So to me, the battle of the game is going to be the chess match between Andy Reid and Mike McDonald. And is Andy Reid going to get who's going to get the better of the other? Because if Andy Reid notices, hey, they're in man coverage right now, he's going to have some crazy rub play to, put us in a mismatch. Kind of like when we played the Rams back a couple weeks ago and we were playing Sean McVay. He had a few of those where, he kind of got us in those bunch splits and started motioning guys back and forth and got leverage. We had leverage issues, especially versus Cooper Kupp and Nakua. And that's the type of stuff that Andy Reid can do too.
Yeah. I think it's just with the Chiefs, like they're a dynasty at this point. There's a reason that they're here all the time. And
well, here's the thing. I think a lot of people are waiting for them to get that one more,
right,
before they call them a dynasty. What is this? How many Super Bowls have they won in the last 5 years? 2?
They've won 2. They've lost 1.
I think they're waiting. They're waiting for them to win the 3rd Super Bowl before people call them a dynasty.
Well, that's BS. First of all, second of all,
because you got to compare them to the Patriots. The Patriots are the measuring stick right now.
Every team is different. You know what I mean? Like it's very. If your standard for a dynasty is to be as good as or better than the Patriots, then we're never going to see another dynasty in the NFL, because that was just once in a lifetime.
They won 6.
Even the Cowboys and the 49ers and the Steelers, when they were like really, really great, they weren't winning 6 Super Bowls. Well, okay, I know the Steelers did, but not in the span of 20 years, So,
yeah,
like that's an unrealistic bar to compare yourself to. I think 2 Super Bowls in 5 years and 6 straight AFC Championship game appearances, 5 of them being at home, that's about as solid of that's about as clear-cut a dynasty as you can have. Like, are you saying that if the Ravens hosted the next 4 AFC Championship games and won 2 Super Bowls, we wouldn't be considered a dynasty? Like,
yeah,
they've earned it.
Yeah,
and it's gonna feel so good when we beat them. It's gonna feel so good when we beat them.
I hope you're right. But yeah, defensively, I think it's going to be the most interesting matchup to watch. I can't wait to see. There's been some trash talk between Roquan Smith and Pacheco.
I'm excited to see how that goes.
That's going to be fun to see on the field. Patrick Mahomes talks, so it'll be.
Patrick Mahomes trash talks on the field, but it's all praise and glory before the game,
Yeah, but like he's got that competitiveness on the field.
Yeah, he has to. He's arguably the best quarterback ever, maybe one day. Maybe.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's very
It'll
rare
be,
to
it'll
say
be.
that
I
6 or
just
7
really hope Mike
champions.
McDonald draws up, and it's going to be a matter of who makes the adjustments faster. There's going to be
Yep.
certain things that are game planned and turn out really good for the other team, and who's going to create that adjustment that locks that down, and then does the other team have the response to that adjustment? It's going to be a battle of that back and forth. Who
Tyler,
can respond quicker?
I want to give you a scenario. We go out there, we do the coin flip, we win the toss. You want the ball first, or you want the ball at half?
I like the ball. I like to kick. I like to defer.
I think specifically in this game, I want the ball first because with the Chiefs, you want to get ahead of the Chiefs and you want to put them down early and force them to have to come back because the Chiefs are just like us. They're really great at playing from ahead. You saw once they got the lead that final time against the Bills, it was like trying to fight an anaconda. It's just not going to happen.
I just think back to
you know,
this past game. We got the ball at half. We went down, set the tone for that second half, and scored right away.
that is true. It's true.
And I like setting the tone early defensively. First drive.
I want to sack Patrick Mahomes 75 times. I want him.
You know that's not going to happen.
I know it's not. Okay, I know that's not going to happen. But I want like 3 or 4 sacks and like 8 or 9 hits.
I just want
one of those games.
I'd love to see them their receivers just come back down to earth like they've been playing all season terribly.
Let's not forget
besides these last few weeks, their receivers have been very, very just average.
I don't want to use this as a point as to why I think we'll win or lose, but let's not forget that we were a Broncos meltdown in the sense of last 3 games away from the Chiefs maybe not even winning their division. Because there was a point where all the Broncos had to do was win out and they would have won the division. Especially because the Chiefs kept losing. They lost to the Raiders and then didn't they lose another game after the Raiders too?
They were at halftime and then they came back and beat the Bengals, I think.
Yeah, but then there was another one. I thought before week 18. I thought they lost one more key one. That everyone thought, oh, it's going to be.
Oh, they lost to the Chargers. Didn't they lose 13-12 or something like that?
Yeah, but that was week 18. I don't know if that. I'm not talking about that. Maybe it was the. Maybe I'm thinking about the Raiders game. Hold on, I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah, but you're going to see a lot of Kyle Hamilton guarding Travis Kelce. He had 2 touchdowns last week versus the Bills. So even though he's had a down year, it's still Travis Kelce. He's been priming himself this whole season for the playoffs, and I don't expect him to really lay an egg or anything like that. I think he'll be out there running around.
I was wrong. That Raiders loss was the last one of the season because then they beat the Bengals and they actually beat the Chargers 13-12. But
I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
But no one was starting anything. That's actually kind of what is so frustrating about the Chiefs is that even though they weren't that great, they still got to rest their starters week 18 and still kind of have that equivalent of a bye. You know what I mean?
They got one home playoff game. But, this is –
the bank is going to be –
Mahomes has said it before. I think earlier this season during the Monday Night Football Manning broadcast, they asked him, what stadiums do you not or have the hardest time where you have to go silent count in? And he brought up Baltimore as one of the top 3.
Seattle and Baltimore.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was, Seattle and Baltimore. And so he thought that regular season game versus us was crazy. This game is going to be on a whole nother level.
Oh, yeah. And, every 5 minutes when they cut to Taylor Swift, our fans are going to be riled up. I know you don't really see that at the stadium, but it's happening. Our fans are, our fans want this just as much as the team. And that's like I've said before, it doesn't just take the team, it takes the city. It really takes the city to win a Super Bowl.
It does.
This is the opportunity that we have been waiting for since 2019. Lamar Jackson is healthy. We have the number 1 seed. We have the AFC Championship game at home. Let's use the advantage that we have finally earned.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into these picks, these bold predictions. I'm going to say offensively, I'm going to say Gus Edwards rushes for 100 plus. Defensively, I am going to say Kyle Hamilton gets us a touchdown, defensive touchdown. And score, I'm going to go with 34-31, Baltimore.
All right. For my bold offensive prediction, both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely combined for 3 touchdowns. And defensively, for the second straight playoff game, we hold the opposing team to, I won't say 0 touchdowns, I'll say 1 or less touchdowns. Not saying they won't score, like field goals and all that. And it might be like a lower scoring, tighter game, but 1 or less touchdown.
That would be great.
And I think the Ravens win this one. I haven't felt this good about a Ravens game since the Lions game. I think Ravens 30, Chiefs 17.
All right. Well, that brings us into our picks standings, which I was going to smoke you last week, but that last game kind of brought us out even. Remember that each game counted as 2 points. So every loss was 2 losses. Every win was 2 wins. So I technically guessed 3 games correctly. You guessed 2 games correctly. And so that brings our overall season numbers very, very close. You got me by 1 game right now. So
I want to say something also. What we should do for this week, I feel like both of our picks, I don't know because I don't know what you're picking for the other game, but if both of our picks are exactly the same, then we should use the scores as a tiebreaker too.
Okay.
Maybe like whoever's closer gets 1.
Okay.
That's the point. If we both pick the games like together,
Gotcha. All right. Well, that just brings us into this next week here, and these are 3 points per game. So really there's only one more game to pick here, and it's the 49ers versus the Detroit Lions in San Francisco. There's no rain affecting this game like there was in the previous 49er game.
Something to note is that Deebo Samuel, he doesn't have a fracture in his shoulder, but he's still questionable. Like they're still not certain he's going to be playing. A lot of when they had their losing streak, that's when they had no Deebo Samuel. So that's something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, just looking at this injury report real quick. Nick Bosa is he's just resting. Deebo Samuel hasn't practiced. Trent Williams resting. Everyone else for the 49ers is full. On the Lions side, Jonah Jackson did not practice this week so far at guard.
That's big.
Yep. Chase Lucas at corner had an illness and hadn't practiced today, did not practice today. Frank Ragnow did not practice at all this week, and he's got 4 different injuries: ankle, toe, knee, and back.
Something to keep your eye on. Late acquisitions.
And Laporta has been practicing in limited.
Well, also, the Lions just picked up Zach Ertz this week. He's on their practice squad right now. He'll probably make his way onto the 53-man roster for the game.
And the spread for this game is 7 points for the 49ers.
Yeah.
So how about this? Instead of the scores, why don't we just pick it against the spread? So currently, I have the Chiefs covering because it was a 3.5 point, and I said they were only going to win by 3. And you have the Ravens covering in that game.
Okay. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a sports bettor. I don't necessarily.
Basically what that means, if it's a 7-point spread for this game, you have to say whether the 49ers, just say your score. And if the 49ers win by more than 7, or if you have them winning by more than 7,
then they cover.
Then you said the 49ers are covering the spread.
Okay. Fair enough. That's fine. I'll let you go first.
Right. Okay. So I think this is a very good matchup. I think the 49ers played pretty bad last week. I think in particular, Brock Purdy probably played his worst game of his career, maybe. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that
No, he
they were
didn't.
playing in a downpour for the most of the game. The end of the game, when they needed it, the rain stopped, and Brock Purdy drove him right down the field.
Also helped that like their rookie kicker of the Packers missed a field goal, and then Jordan Love threw a really bad interception. But
yes,
you know,
but Detroit, looking back at their game versus the Buccaneers, they kind of just dominated that from the get-go. It seemed like, I mean,
offensively, a very convincing game.
Yeah. Defensively, obviously, they struggle, and that's going to be, I think, their kind of weakness. The one thing that I'll say is I think their offense matches up well against the 49ers defense. Even though these 49ers have a really good pass rush, like you look at all their players, you think that they have some dudes. They have not produced a lot of pressure this year. And the Detroit Lions offensive line has done an amazing job blocking this year. They have been one of the best offensive line units in the NFL.
There was a point in time when they were all healthy. They were bullying teams with that offensive line.
And they're able to run the ball, and they're able for Jared Goff to make the throws he needs to make.
Jahmyr Gibbs is the equivalent of Christian McCaffrey for the Lions. Like they use him the same.
He's not at that level yet.
He's not at that level, but like he can break that game open.
I just don't think he has the vision that McCaffrey does.
That's
yet.
That's fine.
But he does have the breakaway speed, and if you put him one-on-one with someone in the open field, he's going to make a miss, just like McCaffrey.
That's also what I was saying.
Yeah. This game, I think, can go either way. I'm really struggling.
What's your gut say? What's your gut? What does your gut say?
My gut says the 49ers are going to win the game, but I also think that they're not going to win by more than 7 points. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I'm going to say they win like 38-34.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Detroit covers, but I think San Francisco wins the game outright.
Okay. The last and only time that the Detroit Lions have ever played in the NFC Championship game was against Washington in the 90s. And I think they lost 41-10, something like that. They never really got to get Barry Sanders included the way they wanted to. It was just kind of over from the start. Every single game that Detroit plays right now is the most important game in their team's history and the most emotional game in their team's history. However, the Bengals did this a couple years ago. First playoff appearance or first playoff win in however many years, going on the road against Goliath, winning. My gut tells me that the Lions are going to win this game. I think that they're going to probably win a close game. But I don't know if Deebo Samuel is going to play or be himself if he does play. And I think that's probably going to be the difference maker because Brock Purdy is a different player without Deebo Samuel. And that's nothing against Brock Purdy. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I really think that a lot of the slander against him is unwarranted. And you're really looking at a very small sample size when you bring up these things. But I think that the Lions will probably win this 27-21 in overtime.
All right. Well, then that's what we got. This is against the spread. So looking at the spread, me and both Michael are picking Lions to cover in that game. In the Ravens game, I'm picking the Chiefs to cover, and you're picking the Ravens to cover.
Yep.
That's it. And just so everyone's aware, I do have the underdog covering but losing in the outright overall. So I would think that my Super Bowl matchup would be the Ravens versus the 49ers, and your Super Bowl matchup would be the Ravens versus the Lions.
Absolutely. I do not have the balls to pick against the Ravens on a Ravens podcast this late in the season, and nor do I feel like I would have to anyway. But just to clarify, is the spread what we're going off of, or is the spread just the tiebreaker, right? The spread's
what I thought the spread's what we were going off of since there's only 2 games.
That's fair. Okay. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure that that's what I thought,
Okay.
Um, it's gonna be a fun one. I wanted to mention I do not have a top 5 this week because I think that we're all playing so synchronized. We're playing
We have a
really well.
top 53.
Right. We have a top 53. We actually have a top 56 if you include our 3 coaches, DC, OC, and Harbaugh. So
Yeah, Harbaugh got put up for Coach of the Year. I think McDonald and Monken both are up for the Assistant Coach of the Year. And then obviously Lamar has been put into the MVP top 5
also,
candidates.
huge news in accordance to Mike McDonald. The Falcons have hired a head coach.
They did, Raheem Morris.
And it is not obviously Mike McDonald. So one less team.
So now there's only Seattle opened, and then there is one other? New England? No, they already got
Seattle, Carolina,
Washington.
Washington.
No, Carolina just hired the offensive coordinator from Tampa, Canales.
Did they really?
Yep.
Okay.
That was where the people were saying Monken was going to be at. So right now the only openings are Seattle and Washington.
Washington seems like the kind of.
And they said it's almost a done deal that Ben Johnson is going to Washington.
Yeah. So, keep an eye out with Seattle because they got a good defense.
But there's also still Mike Vrabel out there.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn apparently is just getting his second interview to go back to Seattle.
Bill Belichick, if you
Bill Belichick.
I'm actually really surprised that the Falcons didn't hire him because all I had heard this week was
apparently Arthur Blank said he was very, very interested in him, but there were just a few hurdles that he wasn't willing to go over. So I'm going to guess that Belichick asked for a number that he wasn't willing to pay.
Either that or he just wanted to be more involved with like the GM stuff than
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, and good for Belichick for kind of like having his standard. Like, this is kind of what I want. He's the best coach in the history of the NFL. He really is. Even if he's had a couple down years, he might take a year off. I doubt his time as a head coach is done.
He's getting up there in age, though.
Okay, so is Pete Carroll. So is Todd Monken.
Is Monken older?
I think he's in his 60s, so not like super old, but I mean, Dick LeBeau coached until he was damn near 100 years old. So.
Well, I think that wraps up the podcast for this week. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you do all that for us. Hit up a comment on what you think the score is going to be for this game, and even the 49ers and Detroit game. Put in that score too.
And guys, this is going to be a tough game. It's going to be very fiery. Just remember, if we do lose with respect. Don't be like the Bills fans and just pelt players with snowballs or something like that. Like, don't be like being disrespectful to Taylor Swift and all of them. Like, lose with grace. We're not gonna lose, but if we do, what I would say, win or lose with grace. We're better than that.
Yeah,
as a franchise, we're better.
Let's just prove as a fan base that we are a top one in the.
We get a bad
NFL.
rap.
You got to think about this. These four Chiefs could end up being Ravens one day. So let's leave them with a good taste in their mouth.
And also, like, the Ravens are a team that a lot of young kids and young fans like because of Lamar Jackson. We want to be a fan base that teams look up to. We get a bad rap because a lot of players have gotten hurt against us. And for some reason, people think that we relish these injuries. Like, we relish in these injuries, and we don't. But we don't need more smoke, positive or negative, we don't need more smoke whether we win or lose. You know what I mean? Let's just win with grace or lose with grace, but we're going to win, and then we'll be in Vegas.
Yes,
we'll
sir.
light the city on fire.
Yep. So enjoy this weekend. Enjoy this AFC Championship game, first ever hosted by in M&T Bank. And I think it is Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern.
Tony Romo, Jim Nantz.
Yep. So for those of you that like Tony Romo, congrats. For those of you that don't, sorry.
Well, we just know it's going to be all about Patrick for 3.5 hours, which is typical with any.
Last week it was all about Josh Allen, even though,
Yeah, but people don't really like to talk about Lamar Jackson that way unless they're forced to. I mean, what was it, Nick Wright, who said he had more faith in C.J. Stroud than Lamar Jackson last week?
Keep it coming. We
Yeah.
see that stuff. All our guys are putting that up in the bulletin. So
Yeah.
anyways, we'll see you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you with the recap episode on Monday.
Let's go Ravens.
Go Ravens.